Hello folks, I'm Dan, trying to finish up this little Moldmaster casting pot project. This is our pot where we had it before. We got it ready to set up for PID control. What I decided to do is I'm using this box. That's what I'm going to mount my PID control in. We've already cut out the faceplate to accept the PID controller. Our wiring will run out through the back, power cord through this side. I'd actually use this on a different PID setup, so it's a new box that hasn't been run, but I drilled another couple holes. I mounted the SSR on this side. Got a nice little piece of oak here, laminated oak that's been kicking around, and we're going to use it for the base for underneath this. I'm going to set the pot just about here. We're going to set the controller back on the back corner with the solid state relay back behind it a little bit. And it's going to be just about like this. A couple of reasons: gives me a nice base to work off of, keeps the PID steady and everything in its place. I'll put a little bit of shielding between the pot and the PID and the SSR just to help keep splatter off of it and keep heat transfer from, allow the PID with the SSR to have its heat sink there and hopefully dissipate a little bit of that heat. So we're going to mount it just about like this. I'll bolt the casting pot down to it. On the casting pot itself, I was going to make some sort of a fancy little cover to go back on over here. What I've decided to do is go ahead and use the original cover. I straightened it up fairly well. It'll set on here. I don't know if I'll put the knob on or not. I'll put the little cover plate back on there just because it looks kind of nice. We'll clean up this housing. And the reason I decided to do that is I'm actually going to use the plug-in that they had, which is just a two-prong plug-in. This mounts through the side of it, was the way it originally was. Just like that, and the plug would actually plug into it. It's not that I want the plug-in capability of it because it'll never get unplugged unless there's a problem, but this was actually the easiest and probably best way I could find to make my electrical connections into this. This is all shielding wire, and it connects into Bakelite or whatever this heat resistant is, electrical non-conductive sheet is that comes through here. So what I'll do is I'll use the wiring that's there. We'll connect this one back up. This will unplug from this side and this will plug directly into it. So I've got good wiring inside, and I've got a good connection going out to the PID controller. I've got the old housing here, and it had a crappy little cord. This is the cord that came out of it, and I'm going to use the plug-in. I'll redo the plug connections and put a better cord on. We'll put a heavy-duty cord that will go through from the pot over into the PID, so it'll have good solid wiring, good fresh wiring, and good electrical connection to connect all that. So that's what we're planning on doing there. So we'll clean up that housing, get it on and installed. This is the way it'll happen. For a PID controller, we got our PID, and it's a ITC 106. These are all Chinese imported PIDs. They're all basically the same. This one's a Inkbird brand on it. I've not used one of these. The wiring's just a little bit different from some of the other ones. They're all pretty much the same, but this one's a little bit different. It's got an extra jumper wire for the thermocouple for the temperature control, and I think that's just because this reads Fahrenheit, where the majority of these, the real inexpensive ones, will only read in centigrade. So we spent the big bucks and got the one to read Fahrenheit. So it'll mount in there. The box will have the normal switches that I've installed on all of my controllers, and this PID should fit right in this housing. We may have to open it up just a little bit to get it to install. There we go. So it'll sit in just like that. Be mounted up there. It'll be back towards the back of the base, which was intentionally, that's the way I set it up. So it's a little bit out of the way from your molds and casting pot. Give a little bit of room, a little bit of separation there just to keep that heat away. As far as putting a wood base under it, I originally was going to take a piece of aluminum, and the reality is, even if you spill that on it, it may char a little bit, but it's not really going to catch fire if you're paying any kind of attention. Why, it's fine. Same way with the plastic housing here. It's not going to be that much of an issue, especially when I shield it. It won't really matter. So this will be a good setup for my little home casting pot. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and finish the layout and get these holes drilled. I'll countersink it in the bottom so that I've got a nice smooth bottom. It doesn't scar up anything if I put it on a wooden bench. And we'll throw a coat of finish of some sort on this just to give it a little bit of protection. And then we'll go ahead and be ready to assemble it, and we'll get everything anchored in place, and we can go back and wire it. Once I get this housing set in place, I think I'm probably going to run this thermocouple with some sort of a clamp to hold the spring down here to keep the tension off the thermocouple wire itself, and then I'll just run it down around the side of the housing that goes on the electrical housing, and then back into the control box. So that'll be a nice clean installation. It won't interfere with anything we're going to do when we're casting, whether we're using it as a dip pot or a bottom pour pot, and that'll work well. I think I'll probably go back and do one more video after this that will be related but somewhat not related, because I'll do one just on wiring a PID controller. Well, what we've done is we made us a nice little base plate, bolted our casting pot down to it, and then we've attached the box that we're going to put our PID control in over here. The way I'm hooking this up is I used the original Bakelite plug-in, and what I'm going to do is we've bypassed the controller entirely for this. The only reason I did this was about the cleanest way that I could see to plug it in. What I've done is I took the original plug-in that plugged in here, drilled out the rivet. I've taken out the old wires, and I'm going to install a new little bit heavier duty wire, and there'll just be a small pigtail that will plug in right here like it originally plugged in through the side of the little box out here, and then it goes down to the hot sides of our solid state relay. What I ended up and did is I took the original cover, cleaned it all back up. I put our plate back on here just because, and I'm going to install a knob back on just because it looks a little bit cleaner. You know, there's no practical application for putting it on there. I think it just looks a little bit nicer and kind of keeps that original look to it. So we've got the knob back on. I've got to get some smaller screws to go back in here. But we'll get some screws. We've got the shroud that goes on the outside there. So we cleaned up our cover, straightened it up. It was all beat up, and then threw a coat of paint on it. This will set back on here. Before I turn this around to do the other side, what I did with the PID control, or with the solid state relay, is it's mounted on a heatsink through the side of the box. On the bottom I've hooked a ground wire, both our power cord wire going in, I've got a ground, and then I've got a ground wire coming from there over to the bottom of the pot, and it's onto that bolt right down there. So now we've got a ground on there. You know, when these were originally built, why they weren't too concerned with having grounds, because if you're too stupid to be able to keep from electrocuting yourself, you probably deserve to be electrocuted. So now we live in this kinder, gentler society where we can't take care of ourselves, so we have to make sure we do that for everyone. Form that down to retain there. Actually, we can probably just do that off the spring of the thermocouple. If we just take that bottom two coils, turn them down, we can probably put them right underneath that screw and have it retain. The only thing that screw does is it's the pivot for the dropper. So if it's locked down on that spring, it won't make a bit of difference. That'll work just fine. So we'll probably do that way. So it'll probably be the next thing we do. Then we're ready to go ahead, wire up the PID control, and this project will be done. All right, you're seeing it for the first time here too, so if things go awry, we're all going to know. That plugs right in. That should power our PID, which it's doing. We're set for centigrade. We'll have to go back and change that. All right, well, here's our little Lyman pot. It's all set up. Here's our PID control on the side. We've got it set to 800 degrees. Had a little problem with this. It hooked up. The PID controller didn't want to kick off. Well, it ended up the inside of the PID itself is wired backwards inside. So rather than the blue wire being on the jumper wire between terminals 5 and 6, I believe, or 4 and 5, why the red wire was down there and on the jumper wire, which should have been, you know, positive and negative. Anyway, they were wired backwards inside the PID controller itself. So once I got that figured out, well, we've got it all hooked up. Everything's back in the box again. Looks like it's warming up. We've got it set for 800 degrees Fahrenheit here, and it's climbing pretty quickly. Well, our pot's here. It's warmed up to temperature. It's been about 20 minutes, but it's been up to temperature for a little bit. So 20 minutes to a half an hour. You know, you need to let your material stabilize anyway. I've been fiddling with it. The pour spout was plugged, so we've had to unplug it, but we've got that going. Temperature ran up to about 810, and then it dropped down. It actually dropped down to about 780, and I haven't been watching that close to see what the PID controller actually reads, but we're at 794 according to this now. I've got another temperature probe that I use for my aluminum casting that I'll get out and I'll double check against that because I feel it's pretty accurate. Anyway, we're at 792 now. Another thing I noticed about this PID is you've got your 4 buttons on across the front. You've got a set button, and you've got a left-hand arrow, and then you've got a down and an up arrow as your 4 buttons. Most of the ones that I have to change your temperature, well, all of them, this is the first one that's actually been different. Why, on the other ones, you either push the set button or the arrow button, I don't remember now, to get it into the temperature set mode. That doesn't work with this one. This one you have to actually hit the far right-hand button once to move your decimal point is what you're doing. And once you get a decimal point flashing, then you can move it across to whatever number you want to adjust to set. So we're at 800 now. I've moved it over to the third decimal. So we go to 810 type of thing. We can move it back down to 800. I'm just going to use 800 as a stabilization. So anyway, that's a little bit different on this PID controller. There's our little casting pot. We're pretty well done with this project. We'll tidy up the wiring a little bit, build us a shield for over the back. Here is our finished product. We're warming up the temperature now. We're about 400 degrees. Pot's all mounted. Our thermocouple wire runs down here along the side, back and into the control box. We've mounted our control box, of course. We built us a little heat shield back in here. I don't know if that's going to show up very well on the camera. Got our little heat shield, attaches to the top and goes across the back there. Also protects the wiring and the solid state relay. We turn it around this way. We can kind of look down, back up through there, and see we've got clearance on everything. It'll kind of protect that relay. So there we are. I'm going to consider this project all finished up. We're heating up a little bit of lead in there. We'll go ahead and show it when it's up to temperature. Well, there's our little pot up to temperature. Well, we're at 69 degrees. We've got molten lead inside, and we're just going to finish draining the pot out. But anyway, I consider this project done. Another addition to the reloading room. If you enjoy these videos, you might want to hit that subscribe button. Give me a thumbs up if you like them, and if you hit the bell notification, you'll know when I put out a new video. There's also these videos I'm loading to my website now, so they'll be on the hillsgun.com website. So I'll have those. I've got a few other little things going, but I'm starting to move those videos over there so you can access them through there too. So they're there if you're interested to go over and check that out. And thanks for taking the time to watch.